Okay, on the show today, Benita Varnado, so also known as Dr. V. She's a healer, she's a physician. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into what you do now.
All righty. So I am a physician, a doctor, an obstetrician gynecologist. And simply put, when I was a young girl, body started changing. I learned about the bodies of women and what we can do. And I thought it was amazing. And so from a really early age, I knew I wanted to be a physician, a doctor. And I made that happen. And I have been in private practice, so been in a clinic, an office, but also in the hospital delivering babies. But I became a mother of two and a wife, and I didn't really have a good idea, or I didn't have a plan. I had a plan how to be a doctor, but no plan on how to put all of that together in a balanced life. And so I went through burnout and I've recovered, and now I'm helping others get out of that.
So what's your main work aside from sort of, the mainstream medical work? Like, what made you reach out to the Embodiment podcast and think, yeah, this is connected to what I do?
Yeah, so actually I have stopped private practice. And so my main work now is really helping women focus on, so some people would call it a life coach. I don't call it that. Mission, vision, meaning in life is the start of health, the start of wellness. And so that's a pretty, coming from a medical doctor, that's probably kind of upside down. But really understanding what your purpose is, what your gifts are, I think that actually leads to a wholeness that then spills over into other areas of your life. Things that we talk about as far as completing the wellness, as far as complete physical and mental health, sleeping, eating right, exercising, managing your stress, reducing substances that put you at risk for addiction, and relationships. And so all of that, I believe, starts when you figure out who you are, what your purpose is, and you get to work achieving that.
And it does flow from that, doesn't it? Like, what gets you up in the morning, your why, Simon Sinek says. And it's funny when you go to a doctor. I've been to a Western and a Chinese doctor this week about some stomach stuff, for example. And it's interesting, like, they don't traditionally, Western doctors don't talk much about lifestyle factors, though the Chinese doctor did a bit more. And then neither of them asked me about, like, how's the sense of life purpose. They didn't say, are you aligned with your values? Like, neither the Western or Chinese doctor did that.
Yes, which is a killer. And that's what I realized. I am a certified lifestyle medicine physician, which does exactly that. We talk about lifestyle and aligning your purpose. But what I realized before I even discovered lifestyle medicine is, I take care of women and most of them are healthy. But they had a lot of depression, anxiety, and just really blah about life. And what I realized is that was really the missing piece. A lot of people hated their jobs. And I think COVID just kind of blew that all up. That people realized.
A lot of people like,
exactly.
Screw this.
They're like, forget this, life is short. And so, yeah, COVID kind of sped that process up. But I realized that long before, that you get that right, and a lot of other things will fall into place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's definitely a foundation. Then, as you said, if like relationships, right? Like, you go to the doctor, they don't say, how's your marriage? But we're both married people. That is a huge one. I'm getting on pretty well with my wife right now. And that is fucking great. Like, in terms of like the touch, the hugs, the life satisfaction, the empathy, the friendship, the laughs. And that's a huge part of my well-being. And like, I can be going through a lot if we're solid, and I'm imagining it's the same with you and your partner.
Yes. Well, I will say, as a gynecologist, that's something that I always talk about is sexual health. And so I will say I didn't get into, well, how is the quality of the marriage? It's like, well, is sex comfortable? Is it painful? Are you having an orgasm? These things. But yeah, I have come to understand that, relationships are everything. I'm doing some crazy stuff. I've been married for 18 years. 18 years, like 2 weeks ago. And I left my job. Thank you. I left my job, and my husband's like, okay. Had he opposed that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. So yeah, that's absolutely important. Your partner, your significant other, and the other people in your squad.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, like there's friends around you, and that like just a huge part of our health is what's being modeled. What's resonating with other people. The friends or stress heads, and I'm lucky. A lot of my friends are like yoga teachers, dance teachers. I was thinking of the people I've been hanging out with Brighton, where I live recently. It's pretty kind of alternative, and I'm lucky with who those people are as well. Though I do say, thinking mostly in Western culture, we're pretty isolated. Right, like I live in a block of flats, like what would you call it, apartment complex. I don't know the name of anyone else in this block of flats.
Oh wow!
There's one,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, we only lived here a couple of months, but it's like I know the guy on the front door who runs the place, Steve, who kind of like because he's down there, I see him pretty much every day. There's some guys from Dubai that I recognize and I kind of nod to because they're often around, but I don't know people here, and that's not unusual. That's not unusual for most people in England or the States or Canada or Australia, or where most of our listeners.
You're right. You're right. It's not unusual today, but 20, 30 years ago, you knew all of your neighbors. And I know for me, especially, I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and it was nothing for if somebody saw you down the street doing something crazy, they would call your mama and say, so-and-so.
I grew up in a village.
Yeah,
I grew up in a farm village, kind of like that.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's differences between groups. Like within Europe, for example, like the Spanish are much more communal. Or like I was just in Portugal, and it's very intergenerational there. You'll see kind of old, young kids all out for dinner in the evening. The different countries, different kind of subgroups, of course, in any country. But as a whole, it seems like Western culture is pretty fragmented, right?
Yes, which that's what I need to change. And that's actually one of my gifts, though. I connect very well with others. I connect quickly. And during the pandemic, I moved to our neighborhood right before the pandemic. And there's a lot of seniors here. And so I just sent a letter out. I made a handwritten letter, and I put it in the mailbox of every neighbor and asked them if they needed anything, if they needed me to take them somewhere or get groceries. Because I was a health professional. I was really the only person out in the neighborhood. And so just by writing a handwritten note, I know all of my neighbors now. They didn't need anything. They didn't need a thing, but they called me and reached out just because I thought about them. So I think sometimes, we have to be the change that we're seeking, to be cliche. And it's worked. There's a village on my street now.
Nice. Well done. Maybe it inspires me to reach out a bit more to people here. Very English about it sometimes. Hello. And easy enough to be, the Irish side of me connects a bit easier when I tune into that. It's a bit more reaching out to strangers, but it's a very, I tried to high five someone in the gym the other day who I didn't know, just because I was feeling enthusiastic, and they just looked at me like I was completely weird and left me hanging. And that's the kind of thing that can happen in England. England quite often. In the States, I would have been high five back, I guarantee it.
Now, question mark, is that post-COVID or pre-COVID? It was the same pre-COVID?
That is both, though it may be more now, the isolation kind of tendency, the sort of, what I've noticed from people post-COVID, and tell me if you've seen the same, is like other people seem tiring. So, for example, I saw some people using those machines in a store the other day, where you kind of check out with the machine. And I said, hey, why don't you go to the counter? Actually, I was in the airport the other day, the same thing. There was no one at the counter, people queuing for 20 minutes to use the machines. And the idea of going to the counter and talking to a human being, which I find quicker and easier, someone can scan my stuff much quicker than I can. It's just, a pain in the ass for me trying to do it. I do it for convenience, but it's like, it seems like other people have become kind of a drain, even more since COVID, though there was always this sort of British thing of being a little bit, islands unto ourselves. But have you seen any of that sort of post-COVID, that kind of like other people as a hassle?
I haven't. I think that, first of all, let me just say about checking out yourself at the store. My husband hates that. He's like, I do not work for this company. Why?
Right.
Why am I checking
Why should I
myself
do?
out?
Is this cheaper? Because I'm doing your job.
I'm doing the work. So, but yeah, it seems like it was kind of starved for connection for 2 years. And as soon as we were able to get out, people got out, people connected. I almost felt like people were a little nicer. I don't know.
Okay.
I might not be the best person to ask because my energy is one of welcoming people. But people just seem to be happy to be out the house and going, talking on airplanes and, getting back out in public spaces. I think there will always be people that see connecting with others as a drain. But that may be their introverted nature, or that may be their energy. But for the most part,
and I have those moods some days, so I do get it. And my wife has them probably more often. But the other thing I've noticed when I was observing in a restaurant was that more young people use the machines as default, and it seemed like there's a generational piece in there, not just a personality piece. Like it's becoming more normal to default to a machine, not a human being.
Yes, and it's perceived to be quicker. And as I have learned, taking care of millennials, people want things fast, fast, fast. Like I want to talk to my patients. I want to ask you those lifestyle questions. And they're like, can I get my sexually transmitted disease test, or can I get my pap smear and go? Like they don't crave that. So
I think it's more of a consumer relationship than a relationship, right? It's like, can I just get this? Okay, so let's go to sexual health and women's issues, particularly, to use a slightly old-fashioned term. What does everyone need to know about vaginas? As our first gynecologist, I think we've ever had on the show, or vulvas more broadly. I've been told recently vaginas and vulvas are very different things. So what do we need? I feel slightly like a bit of a guy in a women's world here, but like what do we need to know?
Listen, are you married to a woman?
I am.
You need to know this too. And you stole what I was getting ready to say. The first thing is that it's the vulva. The whole outside that we see is the vulva, not the vagina. Most importantly, I think people need to know anatomy. They just need to know where stuff is. I mean, men have a penis and you can see it and touch it and feel it. Women have a vagina, you have a cervix at the back, a uterus where the baby lives, but just understanding all of the parts and potentially, what can go wrong. One thing that I like to talk about is, we have to understand that there's a separation between, so there's sexual pleasure, our female anatomy brings pleasure, but it also brings forth a child and it has a purpose. So our breasts can bring pleasure, but they also feed a baby. And so sometimes, especially women after they have children, separating those two can sometimes be a little bit challenging. But I will just tell you, the more that you know about your body, how it functions and what it does, the happier you'll be and the more at peace you'll be. You won't have any anxiety about not knowing those things.
What are some of the things people kind of get confused about, or you kind of need to educate people on, like if anything surprises you, like some more in that territory?
So regarding sexual health, a lot of women think sexual pleasure comes from the inside. It can. So the vagina is a long tubular muscular organ. There is what we call the G spot, which is kind of where the bladder and the vagina meet. The bladder's in front, the vagina's in the back. But there's this little button on the outside called the clitoris, which has all of these nerve endings. And so people feel like they skip over that and just go straight to penetration. And so, in fact, I'm a surgeon as well. So I take out a uterus for example, if women are having really heavy periods. And the number one question is, will I still be able to enjoy sex? And it's like, your uterus has nothing to do with you enjoying sex whatsoever. The only purpose for a uterus is to hold a baby. The only purpose.
It's above the cervix, right? The hysterectomy.
Exactly. The other thing too is that, especially for women, sex starts in the mind. And, going back to what you said earlier, having a good, solid relationship with your partner and that feeling that intimacy, that's the springboard. You can manipulate the clitoris and get some feelings, but really to deepen that experience, you have to have a solid relationship.
Yeah, the way I look at it with a guy, we're like 50% friction, with a woman, it's like maybe 10% tops, you know what I mean? There's just a lot more going on there. And it's a cliche, but there's some truth in that. Even the clitoris, like I saw something the other day, I was like, wow, it's not like this, what we see is the sort of head, right?
It's a lot more. Yes,
it's like this crazy alien that kind of goes around and behind and inside, like a whole structure.
It kind of looks like a wishbone. And so again, you can't see all of our parts that are, contributing to this experience. And so women learning more about their bodies, I think, really is empowering.
Yeah, and this seems to be like increasingly a thing, like more and more women in the kind of embodiment space, they're, kind of celebrating this, exploring this, it was super taboo a while back. And it seems like the world's really opened up on this front.
Yeah. I will still say that we still don't know our bodies. Like they're still not teaching it in school. And the parents of the millennials didn't teach them. But you're right. Women are much more open to sexual experiences. They, the taboo of, okay, I have to wait for the man and I can't initiate, that's kind of out the window. One thing I will say is that I've seen, and listeners, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, women can have multiple partners, but they really have to be in a frame of mind of, I'm enjoying sex and this is not a relationship. Sometimes what I see is when they're trying to have multiple partners and they get attached, or they're trying, some people who are they're interested in the polyamorous lifestyle, but really haven't embraced it, that they start catching feelings. And it's hard to separate that. So I think kind of knowing who you are, what you want, and just being honest about that. If you want to have sex and have pleasure, that's what you do, and that's fine.
Yeah, I want to say like there's been 3 stages, the sort of old-fashioned sex is bad or taboo, and particularly women's pleasure is kind of frowned upon. And then, second stage is kind of like society is much more free, kind of starting in the 60s and continuing in kind of a lot of media today. And then there's a third stage where people kind of go, well, hang on a minute. Does this actually make me happy? Like I've seen quite a lot of research on numbers of partners pre-marriage and how it leads to higher divorce rates and, very low levels of satisfaction and even mental health issues among women who have multiple partners, men to some degree as well, actually, like more than you might think. But there still seems to be a difference in there. And I don't think that's just through to sort of, societal conditioning or something. And obviously there's individuals, I know people who are very monogamous, almost in their core, and other people, that's just not who they are and they never will be, and it's like male and female. And I do see different proportions in that. And I think it's something that people in the gay community as well, I see those kind of proportions. Where I live, it's a pretty gay town, and I definitely see differences there. People don't want to be honest about this for some reason, but it seems there are some differences there.
Yeah, and there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum, and different times of your life, you want different things. Maybe you're exploring and experimenting in your younger years. And then when you're ready to have children, from the female perspective, you're looking for a different person and a different type of connection. I definitely think there's room to tell the truth, which you're right. People don't talk about this and they're not honest. They're not even honest with themselves. And it's just hard to talk about, especially with women who don't find sex pleasurable with the husband that they love. I love him, but this part of our relationship needs some work, and they don't feel comfortable expressing that. And they've been faking it for years and decades. And decades.
Okay.
And it's hard to come out once you've been faking it for a decade to say, you know what, this really isn't working.
Not working for me. So definitely, I don't think I know so many people who fake it, though maybe, more than I'd like to admit. But what I do definitely know when I talk to my friends who are, mostly my age, like 40s, 50s, and there's definitely a lot of sexless marriages out there. That's, Esha Perel has built a whole career on looking at this, super popular theme. Definitely people come to me and say, hey, Mark, I love my husband, I love my wife, but there's just nothing going on. Like, is that a common one there as well? Because that's definitely what I hear.
Absolutely. And, I used to think it was because the act of sex wasn't pleasurable for women. But, relationships have to be solid. There's some strain in the relationships. And going back to kids, man, like people look at, their duties as a mother. I'm going to just speak for women. I don't take care of men. But for women, that duty of being a mother sometimes supersedes the duty of a wife. And when I say duty, I mean giving some attention to that relationship. And so if you want to focus on taking care of kids, you're going to be real tired. And when you're tired, you're not having a lot of sex.
Right. Yeah, just as a practicality. I mean, I know if I'm just, really doing a hard work week, I can just be exhausted and I still love my wife. But, in the evening, by the time we've had a takeaway and watched a movie, I'm just like, I'm dead on my feet. I'm on the couch, I'm exhausted. Add kids to that mix. I know that's a killer for a lot of people. And sometimes, for women, I've heard a lot of kind of physical issues that have come post kids as well, right? So that can be
right. And all of that can be addressed. But I think most important is being intentional, understanding that that's an important part of who you are and being intentional. If it hurts, figure out why. If my partner, if I'm not feeling intimate, have a discussion. But really, really working on it and setting aside some time to, we go to the gym, right? To exercise. We do a lot of things that are, if they're important to us, we set aside some time for it.
Yeah, I invited my wife for the gym for sex the other day, but actually we were told to stop. No, just joking, but I get what you're saying. Like, we make special times and places to go to like church or meditate or the gym or whatever. And I've certainly found it helpful to kind of have a date night and book time and go be intentional about it. I feel like you kind of get the first, 3 to 5 years without being intentional in any partnership.
Right.
It's just want to jump on. And then after that, it's kind of like a little bit more like intentionality is needed. And I think there's an adjustment period there.
Right. And what I have seen as couples age, we have ovaries, men have testicles, we have sex hormones. And so those hormones decline. And so closeness and the bond seems to be very important. Companionship, having someone that you trust and know, going back to the importance of relationships. So, doing what's best for the couple is always a good thing. But, for some, there will be a time where that might not be what you feel like you need in your relationship. And as long as both of you all are okay with that, that's okay. That is okay.
In the notes you sent me ahead of time, there was something there about mum guilt. What did you mean by that? This apparently is one of your topics, mum guilt.
Oh gosh. Yeah, mom guilt is when, and it particularly affects working mothers. So if you're a working, I'm going to say mom, as you all say. I'm from North Carolina. We say mama.
Mama's great. I love your accent, by the way. So feel free. I'm enjoying it.
If you're a working mama, it's like you're putting your time and efforts to work. And that means that you don't have all of the time to work with your children and do the homework and participate in their programs at school. And so there are some women that are doing that. And for some reason, we feel that is better. And so when you're not living up to that standard, you feel guilty that you're depriving your children of having a full-time mom that's always present. But I feel, it's really important for the woman to remember she's not just a mom. And me being a doctor, that is a very important part of being fulfilled for me. And so I had to learn that, yes, mommy sometimes is tired, and my husband takes care of a lot, but I'm still here. I still love them, and spending time with them in my way is also, that counts for something.
Okay, let's ask the hard question. Women are in many ways expected, or may have the expectation, to be successful career, loving mother, good sexual relationships, with their partner, male or female. Is it too much? Is it working? Like, 'cause this is a new system, right? This was not expected 50 years ago, 100 years ago. This was not expected of women. And I like, are we actually just asking way too much of the modern woman that she's got to do all this shit?
Yeah, this may not be a real popular opinion. This is just my opinion. And someone, it may work for them. But I think that when you become a mother and a wife, things definitely change. They just do. As a obstetrician gynecologist, I have to deliver babies, and I'm on call. I'm up a lot at night. I don't want to do that if I have a child who's nursing or who still doesn't sleep through the night. That means I'm not sleeping at work, and I'm not sleeping on call, but I'm also not sleeping through the night because I'm doing the mom. The big answer to that is, I think that I like the statement that you can have it all, but not at the same time. And what that looks like is going to be different for every woman. It's going to be different. I definitely think there's some validity, though, to there being a presence, one of the parents being in the home while the children are being raised. And if that has to look like the man, which in our case, my husband stayed home, but someone from one of the parents, I think, needs to play a very active role in the child's life. And so guess what, Mark, to your male listeners, in order for women to do all of those things, men are actually stepping up. So before, men worked all the time, the women did the housework, and now we're starting to see a balance. My new dads are doing way more than my father ever did. My father always jokes that he never changed a diaper. And so men are very, very involved. And I think that helps women, that gives women the freedom to explore other things that are important to them.
Yeah, it seems like we went from, okay, men did the work, women looked after the kids, did other things, the house. And then women went, hey, we want to do other stuff too. It's like, okay, fair enough. And then no one was looking after the kids. The state, the school system.
Right.
If you haven't got an extended family, you're random people looking after the kids. And then it's like, okay, that doesn't seem to work great either. So is there a third option here?
Yeah, I think everybody figures it out in their own way. I will say that, becoming a doctor, that process, it took 12 years. Had I had this in mind, I might have set up my life a little bit differently. Now what we're seeing is that women are sharing positions now. Like, so instead of working full time, they're working part time, but they have a counterpart that takes care of, their work duties. And so I think that we're going to have to be a little bit more creative in helping women figure out, okay, I do want to work, but I also want to be a mom too and a wife. And if I try to do all of those full steam ahead, something is going to fall by the wayside. Somebody's going to lose.
Yeah, I employ 2 single mothers part-time, and that works because they're part-time. And it works because I know this. And I know that I have to get them appointments in the morning and on the afternoons because they've got their kids and they've got childcare at certain times, and we can work with it. It's no problem. Full-time, I think both of them would struggle. Like they're just from a practical point of view, So it's, kind of flexibility around those things seems key.
And productivity too. We feel like sometimes we have to have a full-time job, but there are some jobs that, can be done on a part-time basis. And for some women, that is, you can focus and you can give 100% and meet the needs of the employer. But just not have to be on the clock, or not even, you can be full time, but okay, can I split the day up? Can I take some time to go pick up my kids? I think we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible in our work day.
As
employers.
I had someone who worked for me, and she'd always message me at like early in the morning and late at night. And I'm like, what are you doing? You don't have to do this, And she's like, no, that's what I like to, that's when I'm free. That's when the kids are asleep or whatever.
When she's
and I was
working.
like, okay, if that works for you, don't feel pressure. But okay,
Good
great.
for you.
It's we'll make it work. I've learned a lot actually having female employees, and like I feel like I've kind of go okay, because I have to kind of think differently. Like when you don't have kids and you work with people who do, you have to really go, okay, this is a whole nother thing, So what about spirituality? That was another thing I know you're interested in. So
wow,
it doesn't really touch base with a lot of medicine or a lot of the things we've talked about, right? Like what's your take on how that impacts these things?
Absolutely. So, we have done studies in medicine that people that have a strong spiritual base, believe in a higher power, they do better when they're healing, when they're fighting cancer. We know that they do better. I'm particularly Christian. My higher power is God. And so when I'm trying to step out and leave my job, I'm being led by my higher power. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know that he will catch me and he's going to guide me. It's not all on my shoulders. And so just having that knowledge relieves so much stress. We always feel like we got to make it happen. We've got to get the followers. We've got to make the dollars. And if you understand that you are here for a purpose, you were created before you even came to this world, you were created for a purpose. And you have special gifts that will allow you to fulfill that purpose. That takes off a lot of the weight of having to make things happen.
Takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It's like, okay, I'm still going to have to get out there and work and hustle, but it's not all on me. And
not all on you.
It kind of takes the ego out of it, I think, as well, right? Like otherwise, particularly as we get success, I had a little bit of success in my field, so have you, and it's like you can take that shit really personally, unless there's some sense of it ain't about me.
Right, it's not about you. That is so huge. That's so huge. And our culture, I'll speak for America, it is all about numbers, and it's about, how much are you making, and social media, how many followers. But that doesn't necessarily speak to value. It doesn't speak to quality. It does not speak to quality. And so you dying to yourself, essentially, and just saying, I'm here to be used by God. That is your purpose. Your purpose is not to get more followers or to get more people coming to your website or to get 1 million downloads on your podcast, right? Yeah. Your duty is to your higher power. And I can do that all day.
Yeah, it's energizing, right? There isn't a drain in it. Okay, well, it's been nice getting to know you. Can I call this episode Dr. Vagina? Is that okay? As we talked about, like Dr. V, I know is your name there, but is that okay, or is that too rude? What do you think?
Dr. Vagina. It's so funny. Nobody ever called me Dr. Vagina until the end of my career, and they're like, "Do you ever get jokes about Dr. V?" I'm like, I really don't. So look, call me Dr. Vulva, and we'll.
Dr. Vulva, you're right, Dr. Vulva. Okay, well, I'm changing it right now on my phone to Dr. Vulva. That's what we're going to go with. We'll educate people about that. Okay, Benita, really nice talking with you. Nice to get to know you a little bit here. So, any kind of closing message before we wrap this up?
Absolutely. I always wrap up any talk with your spirit knows. And so deep down inside, you know what you need, you know what direction your life needs to go in, and we don't need to ignore that voice that is trying to guide us to our higher purpose and our higher self. And so I just say, you have that voice, make sure that you're listening and amplify the volume if you have to.
Beautiful. And Dr. V, where do people find you? You got a website, social media? What's the best place for people?
Yeah. So I have a website, officevisitswithdrv.com. That's also the name of my podcast, Office Visits with Dr. V. And the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I'm also on social media by the same name, Office Visits with Dr. V, on Facebook and on Instagram.
Okay, I'm gonna look you up there. Office Visits with Dr. V. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.